Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Friday, April 28th, with news from Arkansas. Well, last night, about 55 minutes before his death warrant expired, Kenneth Williams was put to death by lethal injection in the Varney unit of the state prison system south of Pine Bluff. He was put to death for the murder of Cecil Bourne, a Grady farmer whom Williams killed while escaping from prison on an earlier capital murder conviction. He'd killed another person, he later admitted, and he killed another person in a car wreck while trying to flee police. Immediately, controversy broke out after the execution last night. Witnesses of the execution said he convulsed, he had labored breathing, he moaned at one point, they believe, after the anesthetic drugs had been administered. Unusual amount of noise and body movement. The ACLU immediately called for an investigation, as did Williams' own lawyer. However, at a news conference this morning, Governor Asa Hutchinson said he was confident that the process followed proper protocol. He said he didn't see signs on the face of any suffering by Kenneth Williams, which is the objective. Of course, a paralytic drug makes it hard for the face to reflect grimaces of pain, for example. He said he had confidence in the prison director. He said he saw no need for a formal investigation, as several have called for. Left for a future time is the question about how the state obtained these drugs using this execution. It apparently lied to a drug distributor to get these drugs. In at least one case, there's doubtful circumstances on obtaining of other drugs. These will have to be decided again anew because the state no longer has a complete supply of fresh drugs to execute further inmates. There are 29 on death row. I should add as a footnote that Kenneth Williams, although he admitted his crimes, said he was a terrible person, claimed to have gone through a conversion to religion during his time on death row. Everybody can evaluate that for themselves. He left a remarkable amount of writing, and that's been collected on a website. Minister Kenneth D. Williams, by a University of Arkansas English professor who worked with him on a writing project. It's hard to believe he could be considered a low IQ, as his attorneys argued, because he wrote in a very perceptive way and very moving way, sometimes not perfect grammatically or spelling-wise, about his experience on death row and what he observed. I say this only as an insight into somebody who died last night in Arkansas without taking a stand one way or another on the death penalty or his own particular case. Elsewhere, violence continues to be a strong theme in Arkansas. During the hour that Kenneth Williams was killed at the Varney unit, 30 miles up the road to Pine Bluff, 2 men were killed in a homicide. Perhaps they shot each other in a shootout fatally. Don't have the circumstances yet. There were 2 drive-by shootings in Little Rock yesterday afternoon. In one case, gunshots fired at one house ended up straying into another house. It was a daycare center for 9 children. None of the children were hurt, but their 60-year-old caretaker was killed by a stray gunshot wound. In Mena, Arkansas today, the sheriff is searching for 2 young children of a woman who was found dead in a nearby creek. Her uncle has also been found dead, victim of a homicide, perhaps 4 people. We don't yet know if these are all related or not, but the circumstances are not encouraging. Arkansas is a violent place. This morning, when Governor Asa Hutchinson talked about executions, he also talked about his coming call for a special session next week to make some changes in Medicaid law so that he can throw 60,000 people off the Medicaid rolls and reduce the cost of the program to the state government and deliver on his promise to trim the rolls of this supposed welfare program. He says he has a few other small items that we don't yet know the details on. I'm interested in some what he calls technical changes to ethics law and the medical marijuana law. I always get a little nervous about technical changes. Technically, they can be very difficult at times. He did announce the state budget has to be cut $70 million in the last 2 months of this year because of the state tax revenue shortfall. Although he says the economy is great in Arkansas, the money's not coming in exactly as expected. He says, however, they've been saving money as the year's been going on by reducing costs of some services. He says this budget cut can be absorbed without laying people off or without reducing payments, for example, to people who get payments for medical services at the Department of Human Services. Good news for those who don't like usurious interest rates. Hank Klein, who's been fighting payday lenders for years in Arkansas, said that a new state law has apparently put a new payday lending operation that charged interest rates of perhaps 200% out of business in North Little Rock. This is the outfit that you may remember Attorney General Leslie Rutledge couldn't be bothered to enforce the law against, but a new state law, sponsored, I should say, by Jason Rapert, not always one of our favorites, apparently has put this payday lender, a bloodsucker, out of business. That's good news. Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin has hired a new Deputy Chief of Staff and Communications Director. He drew him from the ranks of the Koch-financed American for Prosperity political organization, David Ray. Here's a political note for you, too. Maybe there's still life left in the Democratic Party in the form of Win Thompson. He's the former president of UCA, who was at UCA for a dozen or so years, went off and head colleges around the world. He's back living in Conway now, thinking about running for Congress as a Democrat in the 2nd District. Good luck with that if he does. His mind isn't made up yet, but friends of his say he's thinking strongly about it. And on the education front, some articles worth reading in today's newspaper. One from the Washington Post says a school voucher program in Washington, D.C. that let poor children take vouchers to go to private schools, well, their education got worse after they went to the private schools. This comes hand in hand with a massive report out about the failure of charter schools in New Orleans. More administrative costs, not so great outcomes, terrible problems for parents, weighted lottery systems that don't work in a fair way. A lot of bad news about charters. I don't know if this will affect anybody in Arkansas, but certainly the legislature ought to read about it. It was announced yesterday that there's going to be a hearing May the 11th at the Capitol on the placement of the 10 Commandments monument on the state Capitol grounds. They've announced that there's no need for the public to show up because they won't be allowed to speak if they don't like the idea of the state promoting religion on the state Capitol grounds. If and when the Secretary of State approves this monument for placement, as he's expected to do, a lawsuit is certain to follow. And finally, here's a musical note to end with. The City of Little Rock is going to place 3 brightly painted pianos around town for people to sit down and noodle on as they wish. Well, you don't have to be able a piano player to bang on it, but they'll be out there to have fun. I've seen this in use in some other cities, London for one, and it's a lot of fun. I hope this doesn't end up like our great free bike share program did a few years back when all the bikes got stolen in about 1 week's time. Pianos might be a little harder to cart off. There is at least that, although you know these guys will cart off a cash machine now and then, so you never know. We're still resisting the forces of evil here. I hope you do too. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back Monday.